Director of the Mastery-Based Learning Collaborative at the State Board of Education, and I'm here today facilitating this session with Linda Drake, our Director of Career and College Readiness Initiatives. As is our practice, we start this meeting by acknowledging that this statewide meeting joins and works with Native American communities on the traditional lands of 29 federally recognized tribes and numerous other Native American tribes that have not received federal recognition. We acknowledge that peoples native to this land have not been well served by our educational system, and we ask that you join us in our commitment to recognizing the important history of Native peoples in our state and in honoring Washington's tribes as one step towards dismantling the colonialism present in our education system. I am joining you today from the traditional lands of the Nisqually and Coast Salish peoples. And if you're interested and don't already know, there's a resource on screen to discover which traditional tribal lands your home and work occupies. So today we're in webinar format since we have so many participants registered, but we do want to know who's in the room. So please share in chat your name and your location, and if appropriate, also your organization. And then we are going to launch a poll to better understand roles of folks in the room. So let me get that going. So, and please select all that apply on this poll. If you're a parent and an educator, please select both so we kind of get a sense of all folks' various roles in the room. All right, y'all, 15 more seconds if you're wanting to respond to the poll. Okay, so I think you should be seeing the poll results now. I'm not surprised we don't have any students in the room because we're having a student listening session in a couple of weeks. But it's great to know we've got some families, educators, community partners, higher education. This is awesome. Thank you all for answering that. Very helpful. So before I move on, I did just want to give a quick overview of our time together today. We're going to do a couple of quick word cloud exercises to get started, and then Linda and I are going to give about a 10-minute overview of background information to inform our discussion today. Then we're going to dive into another exercise, and the rest of our time together will be around some guiding discussion questions where folks will be able to unmute and the host will invite you to turn on your video to share your thoughts once we get to that discussion segment. So to get started, we wanted to hear from you based on either your experience or your students' experiences. What 3 words would you use to describe current graduation requirements? So you can follow the instructions on the screen. If you're using your phone, you can just hold it up to that QR code and it should pop up. Or you can go to minty.com and type in that code, and then you'll be able to respond with those 3 words. And just in case anybody isn't familiar with our state graduation requirements, you could also think about current learning experiences your students have had in high school and describe those in a couple of words. All right, we're going to give folks just a minute to respond to that. And then I think Jay Lee is going to share the results for us on screen. Okay, this is interesting. I'm seeing some conflicting words too. So I see flexible and then I see kind of flexible. Let's see. Burdensome, challenging, fair, ever changing. Not relevant. We hear that one a lot, not relevant to students' lives. Okay. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and move on to the next word cloud exercise. So this one is just a little bit different. This one is, what 3 words do you hope could describe graduation requirements in the future? So we're kind of thinking about, as the state board engages in our work to develop recommendations to align graduation requirements to the profile, what do you hope you can then describe graduation requirements in those 3 words? I love that relevant is right there in the center as one of the top words people are using to describe future graduation requirements. That's great. Individualized, supported, equitable. Those are great words. Thanks, y'all, for kind of humoring us and sharing your thoughts in this way. All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and move on, but we're going to keep these and share these with our board members too, because they're going to be really interested in your thoughts as well. All right, let me advance the slides a little bit. Okay, with this, I'm going to turn it over to Linda.
Right, as we engage with you all and talk about graduation requirements, we felt it would be worthwhile to have a really high-level, quick overview of some of the background that led us to the point where we are right now. So around the time that kids that are in high school or starting high school right now were born, the state board was charged by the legislature for examining the purpose of the high school diploma. And in 2008, the High School and Beyond Plan became a requirement. And around that time, the state board also started developing a 24 credit requirement. Some of you all in education might remember Core 24. The reasons for looking at a 24 credit requirement was that there was sort of a mismatch, a misalignment between what students and parents thought a graduation meant, what a diploma meant. And in fact, at that time, it didn't really align very well with minimum college admission standards. So there was a miscommunication about what the diploma did. And also about 35% of seniors were not taking a full high school load and were entering college and needing to take below college level courses. So their students were not taking advantage of a free K-12 education to prepare themselves for college. Now, it's worth noting that that statistic of about half students needing to take below college level math and ELA has improved. So over the last 10 years or so, that has dropped from about 50% to about 20 or 25%. And there's a lot of factors that go into that, but one of the significant factors may be that the state started requiring 4 years of English and 3 years of math. So that may have contributed to students being better prepared to take college level courses. And then the final reason was that Washington graduation requirements at the time were significantly lower. There were fewer credits and subject area requirements in Washington than there were in other states. So there was a concern about our students being competitive with other states. Next slide. So in 2014, the legislature approved implementing a 24 credit graduation requirement, and those requirements were phased in between the classes of 2016 and 2021. In the 2013-15 biennial budget, there were increased funds that were carried forward to support new graduation requirements. From 2008 to 2019, exit exams were part of graduation requirements. There were students needed to pass an exit exam or an alternative. That system of exit exams was replaced with graduation pathway options, sort of the newest set of graduation requirements that were implemented with the class of 2020. And then most recently in 2021, the legislature directed the development of the Washington State Profile of the Graduate. And this is, looking at what we want from our graduates. And I think I'll turn it back to Alyssa to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Linda. So Washington has been on a journey to increase capacity for mastery-based learning in our system. Mastery-based learning allows students to demonstrate their learning in different ways and embodies many other aspects of good teaching that's really outside of the scope for our discussion today. But I believe Stephanie will post a link in chat in case you're interested in learning more about mastery-based learning. So I say all of that to say that the state's mastery-based learning work group was charged to develop a profile of a graduate, as Linda said, describing the cross-disciplinary skills that a student needs to develop by the time they graduate high school to be successful in their next steps in life, whatever those might be. The profile of a graduate is a way of really enabling our educators to focus on all of the important skills in the classroom that we want our students to learn beyond just the academic content, skills like critical thinking and problem solving and financial and digital literacy. And the profile will also set the vision for what we require of all students, regardless of how we deliver instruction in a more traditional school or in a school that's implemented mastery-based learning. And then the profile is also a way to redefine more holistic graduation requirements based on what students need to know and be able to do for future success. So the state's mastery-based learning work group members believe that Washington really has an imperative to shift the focus of our education system from an industrial model that sorts students to one that intentionally supports every student in developing the dynamic range of skills we want to see in each graduate of our K-12 system. We can do that through Washington's profile of a graduate. This first slide on the profile shows only the larger categories of skills and attributes and how those characteristics align with current laws around the goals for basic education and the purpose of a high school diploma. So these laws already guide what students should know and be able to do by the time they graduate from high school, but the work group hopes that the profile of a graduate will really bring these laws to life and help communities understand all of the ways that our education system helps develop our students as whole people beyond just their academic knowledge. So this slide shows the larger categories as well as how the work group has grouped the subcategories of skill under each larger umbrella category. The development of the profile of our graduate skills is really a lifelong process. So the K-12 system focus is to support students in developing age-appropriate foundational skills, which prepare them for after graduation, for careers, for their future educational journeys, and to be lifelong learners and engaged citizens. So once fully implemented, we would expect all Washington students to be developing these skills throughout their K-12 education, and that high school graduates would have the ability to draw upon each of these interconnected skills at the appropriate time. So moving on to really our purpose for today, the legislature has charged the State Board of Education with doing a holistic examination of our graduation requirements and has authorized the State Board to submit recommendations to the legislature to align graduation requirements with the profile of a graduate by December of 2022. In developing these recommendations, the State Board is required to consider the relationship between credits and core subject area requirements, potential changes to the requirements, and how the components of the diploma can better work together as a system. So with that, I'll pass it back to Linda.
All right, so now at this point, I'm just going to go quickly over what our state graduation requirements are to help inform you all as before we start listening to you on your thoughts. So there are 3 parts to the Washington High School Diploma: the High School and Beyond Plan, credit and subject area requirements, and graduation pathway options. Next slide. So these are the credit and subject area requirements. They include 24 credits, but districts have the authority locally to waive 2 of the flexible credits for individual students. So individual students need to earn a minimum of 24 total or 22 total credits to graduate. The credit requirements are based on teaching learning standards. Washington has a set of learning standards in different subject areas. And local districts may add additional local requirements in addition to these state requirements. So there are 17 core or foundational subject area requirements, and then there are 7 flexible credits. Next slide. These are the college academic distribution requirements. As I had mentioned before, earlier graduation requirements didn't align as well as our current requirements do. A lot of the core credits overlap with the college academic distribution requirements. And then in addition, also 2 credits of world language are included in CATERS. Next slide. This is a list of the graduation pathway options. This is the system that replaced the former exit exam system. And it's a combination of assessments and course-based options. Next slide. And then the third part of the high school diploma is the high school and beyond plan. This is supposed to hold the 2 other parts of the diploma together. It's a way that students can work with educators and their family to choose courses and educational activities during their high school and to plan for what they want to do after high school. Next slide. And then finally, I want to mention that graduation requirements are what students need to meet, but there are other requirements on the educational system. These are all requirements that are in statute that districts must offer to students or make sure that all students have access to. So districts are required to make sure that they offer a program that allows students to meet graduation requirements and also provide the mandatory educational offerings listed here and are also encouraged or recommended to offer recommended or encouraged items listed on this as well. Okay, next slide.
Okay, so we have concluded our very sort of fast and furious overview presentation, and we're ready to hear from you. So first, before we dive into sort of larger group discussion, we wanted to do just one more exercise in Padlet, talking about, so 2 questions that you can answer. And I think Jaylee's going to pop this link in chat for you to click on as well. But just in case anyone has issues on clicking on the link in chat, we wanted to put it on screen too. So in the Padlet, you'll see both questions. You'll see what are some of the assets of our current graduation requirements. So for instance, maybe it's an asset that our credit and subject area requirements are pretty closely aligned to college admissions requirements. So things like that. So we're wanting to hear from you. What do you see as assets in the current graduation requirements, as well as about gaps? So what are some skills in the profile of a graduate that are not adequately addressed in graduation requirements? So I would say an easy one from the slide that Linda just said is financial literacy. That's in the profile very clearly, but districts are only have to offer it to students. Students don't have to take it. So maybe that's a gap. So I'm hoping that that explanation of the activity is clear. It looks like Padlet link is in chat. And so I think at this point, we're just going to be quiet and let you think for just a couple of minutes and respond to these prompts in the Padlet. And if anybody has any issues with Padlet and needs to respond in chat, of course, that's fine too. One more thing I probably should have said in Padlet, you can also heart or like other people's ideas. So if you see an idea that you agree with, you can also just heart it. So we can kind of keep track of where do folks think is some of the most important assets or gaps. All right, so if y'all are still writing, please feel free to continue, but I just wanted to sort of notice some of the things that I'm seeing. That's really interesting to me. So it sounds like folks do think it's a good idea that as far as assets and the requirements, that our subject area requirements are fairly well aligned to the college admissions requirements. Seems like folks do continue to really like having multiple pathway options for students. As far as gaps, seems like folks really think social and emotional learning is a gap. Seeing some other repeated ideas, so this is great. Does anyone want to raise their hand and maybe unmute, share a thought from your perspective, things that are standing out to you from this?
Alyssa, this is Randy. I just note there's also a counter narrative to that. People pointing out the need for better pathways to career and so forth as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're exactly right, Randy. Thanks for clarifying. I did not say that and I should have. So thank you, Randy. Sulan, it looks like you want to share a thought.
Yes, thank you. I think you just, you touched on it, and it really was looking at how we're looking at additional pathways that are community-based and how we provide the language within that. And then aligning that with some of the graduation pathways. You know, sometimes the language is vague in some of the descriptions. And so how do we look at that in aligning that with community-based organizations? Thank you. I hope that makes sense. But you did touch on that with the CTE framework and everything.
I have to admit, I know Sulan, so it makes sense to me, but do you want to maybe share a little bit more about what you mean around sort of like community pathways from your expertise, Sulan?
Thank you. So yeah, we have students who are engaging in environmental restoration up in our tribal lands, and you know, utilizing some of those experiences for credit pathways. But you know, I'm experienced in that, and some of the administrations and schools that we work with are familiar with those pathways. But I don't believe if a district or an organization is not familiar with how to line up those pathways with the state requirements, graduation requirements, that it can be tricky. So that's an example. I hope that helps. Another one is looking at some of the maritime pathways, which is also a CTE pathway. And then how is the CTE departments looking at those community partners? So really looking at how our community and the assets that our students are already navigating and bringing that into the classroom for learning. Does that help?
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did anyone else want to speak on sort of these sets of questions before we move on? If so, if you could raise your hand so we know to promote you to a panelist and let you turn on your video if you'd like to. Perfect. Thank you, Steve. Feel free to go ahead when you're ready.
Go ahead, Steve, if you'd like to share some thoughts.
Hey, just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you. Hey, no, I just wanted to comment on Tom Holst's remark that I think citizenship is implied, but it isn't explicitly identified in the profile. And I do think that is a really critical skill set moving forward. I mean, I think we're seeing it play out internationally, and that's why I said I think it's implied when it talks about global responsibility. But I just think somehow if we could integrate that concept a little more directly, I don't know how, and I just don't know if this is already perfected and finalized, if there is any ability to make a tweak. But I just like to, I guess, reinforce or elevate what Tom mentioned about citizenship. And that was my comment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think the only thing I would say is I think sometimes, at least from the work group members' perspective, there's a connotation with the word citizen, right, for our folks who are not citizens of this country. And so I think they didn't want to use the word citizen because of that connotation. But absolutely, I think your point is well taken, that sort of the importance of being good citizens in our community. I agree. It's
civic skills or something like that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's implied in the profile, but I see your point about wanting to see it come through more strongly. So I think that's something the board can consider in their work to develop recommendations to align graduation requirements to the profile. And I will just sort of note that I can't always keep up with chat and facilitating live discussions. So Tom, thank you. I know you've been engaged in the profile work as well. And I appreciate Steve calling out your comments as well. So we will read all of your comments. I just might not be able to respond to all of them in the moment. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. All right, let's see. Oh, we've got lots of folks wanting to chat. Wonderful. So let's see. As far as who we have next, let's go with Lynn Crawley.
I think when we promote folks, sometimes they cut out and can't hear for a few minutes. So go ahead, Lynn.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Oh, good. Now I can hear myself too. Okay, so thank you so much for the comments that was just shared. I agree with what you just shared there, Lisa. And I think maybe a better term to use is civic education when it comes to learning about citizenship, because nowadays a lot of people also promote the ideas of world citizen, since we are all living in this global kind of environment nowadays, and people do affect each other. So not only we wanted to learn about what is surrounding us in the immediate area, but also, you know, globally. So I think that's a really good idea. I also really would like to see the graduation requirement will include the ethnic studies, mainly because this is something I think will help people to learn about each other. And sometimes people are not necessarily really know who are right next to them and where their families are coming from. And sometimes that unknowing kind of nature of our, you know, relationship sometimes can really deprive someone to learn how to better adjust as well as interact with each other. And I think that's a very important skills nowadays for people who are growing up. And therefore, I would really like to see something like that to be considered. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate that. Lisa, I believe you had your hand raised. I promoted you to panelist if you still wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Can you hear me, Ann? Mm-hmm. Okay, for being here today. I just left 28 years of education in Spokane Public Schools, and I'm working in a startup right now, coaching purposeful direction. And I'm just thankful that people care deeply about these things and want to share their thoughts and ideas, because having spent a lot of time in all of these areas, I feel like the fidelity to the law is usually what goes away if the funding's not there or whatever. So we've got great practices. We have incredibly smart people, and we have thoughtful plans on behalf of most, if not all, students. But then when it gets to the schoolhouse, the fidelity kind of goes out the window based on what the resources are. And so I wanted to come on today just to represent the business community, because we are working with the business community. And I do believe that in light of what happened with the pandemic, that this is a conversation that they would really like to support. And part of that fidelity might be some flexibility that we're seeing in the mastery of learning, where students can get those experiences outside of the classroom that can allow them to get credits and things like that, similarly to what we would see in a college setting, where they're putting in the work, but maybe it's not exactly sitting in a class for seat time. So I learned 2 new things today, Padlet and the mentor thing. I'm loving it. Thank you so much. And if you don't mind, I'm working in a charter school in Spokane right now for pregnant parenting teens, and also a low-income high school. And I would love to get the kids signed up for your student group coming up, because I know that they have a lot of thoughts about this particular work, because that's what we're working on right now, is how to get them prepared for the future, adding some layers onto the system itself, and supporting the staff who are trying to hold up the high school and beyond plan.
Oh, Lisa, we would love to have more students sign up for our session. So we'll put some information in chat for you about that. But thank you very much. Very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
William, I believe you had your hand up, and then I think, because we did have some other discussion questions we wanted to get to today, I think I'll say, William, last one on these, and then we'll move on. But William, you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm typically a big numbers guy, and one of the things I kind of do is like the statewide comparative study. There are lots of kind of bad studies online, I think. And I try to ignore the bad ones, but the one that seems the most consistent is the Forbes one. And so the Forbes one in 2018 had the state of Washington at 17th state in the country. Then in 2020, they didn't do it in 2019. In 2020, they were down to 26th. Sorry, no, they were 18th, and then they were dropped to 21st. And that doesn't seem like a bad drop. They do two metrics. They do a quality metric and a safety metric. The safety metric went up. They're fifth, up from 10th. But the quality metric is what dropped. The quality metric went from 17th to 26th. And this is trapping things like dropout rates and SAT scores and things like that. So I kind of wonder, as you introduce more criteria and whatnot, this is just a simple metric. Are we going to dilute this and kind of not focus on some of the other things that are kind of like more preparatory, and so sort of like kind of bring up the education bar for just the state in general?
So just to clarify your concern, William, you're concerned if we start sort of focusing on these skills that are in the profile, we won't spend as much time on the academics. Is that what I'm hearing?
There are only so many hours in the day. Yep.
There are, and I would be happy to talk offline about this some more too, if it's helpful. But I will say that there is also quite a bit of research out there that says if teachers are really incorporating these sort of interdisciplinary skills into the classroom, that students actually learn the academics better. So there's my short response, but happy to chat more offline anytime if that's helpful.
Alyssa, could I jump in though? Because
yeah,
I think there's another related piece, which is, the purpose of this work isn't to add requirements, but it's really to evaluate what the requirements are, because I think over years there has been a process where things are added and nothing is really taken off. And so that's part of what we're trying to understand, is kind of what is the scope of that we're asking for, and is there a need to adjust some of that?
Thanks, Randy. As always, helpful clarification.
Well, just to clear up though, if that's the case, this should be a zero-sum game. And so if things are promoted, it would be interesting to know what's being demoted as well.
I'm not suggesting, yeah, it's a fair point. I'm not suggesting it's zero-sum game, because we're really talking about two different things. But I think when you saw Linda present earlier, there's the 24 credits, 17 which are defined. And then in addition to that, there's about 15 other additional requirements that districts are asked to offer or do with schools and districts. And so what we're trying to do is just put it all on the table and say, is this the right mix of stuff, or do we need some adjustments? I'm not sure zero-sum is quite the right way to look at it, because there's opportunities for integration, interdisciplinary delivery, lots of other ways you can kind of slice the apple here.
Okay, so I think with that, we are going to move on to our next set of discussion questions. But y'all feel free to keep commenting in chat, and if folks want to keep responding as well, raising your hand if you have questions. And Shara, it looks like Stephanie just gave you the links that you're looking for, so hopefully that's helpful. So with this, at this point, we really do just want to continue the discussion. And there are, of course, a lot of folks on the call. So if folks could try to keep their comments brief so we can hear from as many people as possible, that would be awesome. So feel free to either respond in chat or raise your hand and then respond to really any of the questions that are on the screen right now. Shira, I wasn't sure if you still wanted to respond to these questions or if you've gotten everything you need from those links.
Oh, hi. I'll wait. Sorry, I'm just reading the questions now.
No, you're good.
Comment on the prior stuff, but I'll wait. Thank you.
You're good. Other folks that might have thoughts about any of these on screen?
I guess one question I have is, a lot of these things really get at the heart of what is the purpose of a public education system. And I'd love to hear what is the state board's view on the underlying very basic purpose of why we have high school education and why it's taxpayer funded, and what's the basic goal, and where does that end and the role of the family or the community start?
That's a big question we could spend all day on, but I might ask if one of my colleagues could pop our, we have in statute, so the legislature created really sort of a purpose statement for our high school diploma. And so I think that would be my like fast, sort of simple answer to your question. But certainly we can't do public education without family involvement, right? We know kids learn better when their families are involved in the learning process. That's why we have sort of for like our high school and beyond plan that Linda talked about, families are supposed to be involved. We have all these ways that we hope families are involved in our education system, though of course our educators, you know, sometimes have capacity challenges and things like that. But certainly education is better when we're all working together for students, right?
And I don't know who's driving the PowerPoint, but maybe pop back to the first page of the profile. It has the statutory definition on there.
Oh, sure. Great idea, Randy. Sorry for the scrolling, y'all. I hope I'm not making you dizzy. You wanted the profile one where you can see, yeah, purpose of diploma right on this left side where my cursor is. So
that's what the statute says it is. And then on the right is the goals of basic education, which is also statutory language that says what essentially the purpose of our education system, public education system is.
Okay, so I'm going back in chat and I just wanted to respond to Joanna that yes, absolutely. Some of these profile skills, that's exactly what we have in mind, can be part of the school and classroom climate and shouldn't be separate requirements. It's really integrating these skills into students' learning experiences in the classroom. You're exactly right, Joanna.
And to the point, the prior question, the purpose of the profile is actually to further define what is it we're trying to achieve through our public education system.
Exactly. Thanks, Randy. Okay. Let's see. Juliet, it looks like you're wanting to respond.
Oops. Okay. I guess it takes a few clicks to unmute. Can you hear me?
I can.
So I guess one of my questions is, so there's a lot going on education related in Washington State right now, in addition to this profile of a graduate from not just, I mean, multiple things the State Board of Education is working on, things that the Professional Educator Standards Board is working on, things the legislature is working on, things that OSPI is working on. And it seems like at times these things are at cross purposes, or at least not aligned with each other between entities. So for example, this profile of a graduate and these multiple pathways seem like they're really focused on the individual student and making sure that students get an individualized plan to help them get not just to graduation, but to whatever their goals are beyond graduation. Which seems to be in conflict with the CCDEI standards that the Professional Educator Standards Board just passed, which requires teachers to shift their focus from the individual student to the collective we. And then the profile of a graduate where it talks about critical thinking skills, I don't have it up right now, but some of those critical thinking skills and learning how to engage with a diversity of ideas seems to be in conflict with the ethnic studies pathway that the state school board is looking at right now, which is a very ideological based approach to ethnic studies, which would not promote critical thinking. So I'm wondering what effort there is to work across agencies to make sure that our students are kind of caught in between with all these multiple things moving forward at the same time, but at different agencies.
That is a complicated question that I'm sure I won't do justice to right now, Juliet. So, and this goes for anybody. If there's something that we don't fully address and you want to chat more offline, all state board staff emails are on the website. You're more than welcome to contact us anytime. So my simple answer is both OSPI and PESB, as well as a number of organizations, were on the work group that developed the profile of the graduate. So certainly, and of course, as sort of sister agencies housed in the same building, you know, we're meeting with OSPI and PESB staff daily, right, on various issues. I can certainly see how sometimes the system, it doesn't feel as aligned as we'd like it to, right? So certainly hear that feedback. But I would just say we are all doing our best as state employees to make the system as aligned as possible so that our students aren't caught in the middle, to your primary concern. Hopefully that's helpful, but if any of my colleagues want to jump in, please feel free.
The other place that we're sort of building some alignment is in a joint project that Alyssa is leading, which is around the Master-Based Learning Collaborative itself, which is that's allowing us to kind of or will be allowing us to kind of see how certain aspects of this play out and what the policy barriers or challenges are across agencies. And we have each of these, the three main agencies, as well, again, as others engaged in that work too. So that will help us to identify. So you mentioned the CCDI standards, for example. If that's in conflict with something that we're trying to achieve through this project, then there's an opportunity for feedback to the PESB for that policy piece. Or if there's a challenge with one of our policies, the same would apply. So that's the type of thing that we're trying to do to try to address that. And I think you flagged a couple that we can actually explore more deeply with the other agencies as well. So.
Thank you.
Sulan?
Yeah, aloha. So
Tariq is also in line.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. My bad. Okay, Tariq.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. I was just wondering, maybe I joined a few minutes late, but how are you going to use the data to change like your outreach you're doing with a community longer term, especially around like language access? Like, are you all targeting specific groups and not just Spanish, like language groups like Somali, Mandarin, and yeah, just curious how would you like, how are we going to highlight like those communities that are like most impacted in the education system?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. I would say, first of all, so the work group that developed the profile was very concerned about language access. So we have the versions of the profile in the top 10 spoken languages in our state available on our website. But you're right. I mean, the state board, we have a small staff, of course, but we can always do a better job doing, really authentic community engagement, especially with communities that aren't well served in our system. So I might just take an opportunity to actually plug the fact that the state board is about to post a job announcement around a student, family, and community engagement coordinator, because we know that's something that we need to improve on, right? So if you know folks that you would want to send our way, we would love to have them. And hopefully that's something we're going to be continuing to increase our capacity for once we get that new position hired. So I feel like I'm not answering your question well. I think what I would just say is we need communities' help to do that. And so if you have ideas and want to talk offline, please reach out. We'd be happy to meet with you anytime. Okay. I was pausing in case you wanted to respond.
Yeah, no, I just had one more quick.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess around that is how do we bring bring more people to the table to up to help lift their voices. I guess you kind of you answered that in the end per se.
Well, maybe not well enough. Maybe I'll just pause just for a second to actually plug, just in case we run out of time at the end, okay, additional ways to engage in this work. And I would say, like, for instance, if you have connections to certain communities like the Somali community, if we know that there's a desire for translated materials, we're always happy to do it. We don't just translate materials in case we know that, until we know there's a need, because we don't want to not spend, taxpayer money wisely. But the moment we know there's a need, we're happy to do it. So again, if you're connected to those communities and want those translations, let me know and we'll get right on it. But we have additional listening sessions folks can engage in. We're going to have an upcoming survey later in the year. Folks are always welcome to come engage at board meetings and give public comment. And then we're happy to go to community meetings, right? We don't always want folks to have to come to us. If we, whenever we get invitations to various community meetings, we're happy to go give a little background like we did today, and then just listen to the community. So we're open to any ideas that folks have. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Of course. Okay. So let's see. Sulan, I believe you had your hand raised. So let's go back to you.
I did. Mahalo. Aloha. So, I wanted to touch a couple of things that several of our participants today talked about, and the gentleman earlier just spoke on the community participation. So when we begin to look at that collective community partnership, and I think everyone kind of touched on what does that look like. We begin to co-teach. That alleviates the time and the wear that is placed upon our educators. And time is, again, something that we all talk about. There's only so much time in the day. But when we begin to partner with our communities and we begin to partner even with our environments, those are co-teachers. And when we bring our co-teachers into our educational pathways with us, we begin to look at the asset base. And I spoke earlier on how we utilize experiences that our students are using or having or engaging in outside of the school. And how do we bring those partnerships into the school? And so it really is about building those pathways and promoting and encouraging graduation pathways that are not just siloed within a discipline or in even a district, right? That we are co-creating and co-educating and co-teaching and learning with our communities, our environments, and then bringing those assets and those experiences with our community members and looking at how we can align them with the standards that need to be met within our school districts. And I think that's something that we think we have to carry the burden of education on our own shoulders. But if we begin to co-create and even cross-teach, so science doesn't have to be science. Science can be with math. Math can be with history. And so I wanted to say that because that cross-teaching, that co-teaching really takes the restrictions of time. And then that's that holistic learning that I heard about somebody talking about earlier. How do we look at that holistic learning and the child being able to develop what their own curiosity and their pathway is going to be above and beyond high school? And then, that language of citizenry, right? I really like, contributing community members. Those are contributing community members because then they now have navigated their high school pathway with communities. So they know what those needs are. And whatever their career pathway might be, whether that's going to college or through high school or a CTE program or trades, they're still contributing to what the needs of that community is. And so, it really is about the relationships, the collective community partnerships, and the co-teaching and co-creating. And so I just wanted to say that because I think everybody touched on that, but I just wanted to kind of wrap that in a space where maybe that helps us to understand in the movement that is happening. And I just want to say, I know that, Randy and Alyssa and Linda and Jaylee is doing a lot of that great work right now and creating opportunities for districts to see what that looks like as we navigate these conversations. Thanks. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know we're running out of time. We've got time for a few more comments, but I wanted to circle back to chat for just a second. Joyce, quickly, I wanted to say, no, it's not our assumption that teachers know how to do this off the top of their heads, right? That's part of why the Professional Educator Standards Board was involved in the process to create the profile. And we continue to work with our teacher education programs around this work too. So that's my short answer. We have more resources coming around the profile that will be ready soon. And I'm happy to talk more offline about that. So thank you for the question. That's a great question. John, to your question about not seeing students with disabilities mentioned, absolutely. We hear, actually what we hear often about the graduation pathways is that they don't work for some of our students with disabilities. So I would love to hear more from you if we have time, sort of what you're thinking about in relation to your comment in chat. So, okay, with that, William, you've had your hand raised for a while. Did you want to chime back in? William, we can't hear you if you're speaking. You're still muted.
I apologize. The Zoom is not being friendly to me today. Just wanted to follow up, I guess, on the heels of what Sulan was just talking about, because she talked about bringing aspects of the community into the school that the kids participate in. That I think can be a real slippery slope. Primarily in regards to, especially when you get to these bigger communities, some kids, they have their own thing, or there's too many diverse options for students. Sometimes they just want to engage with their family at home. Sometimes they just want to ride bikes in the streets. I think this is something where it's going to be, what are we defining where the school ends and where the school begins? Because I've seen more kind of programs coming out like this. I mean, when I was going to high school, there was a simple requirement of, you needed to do so many hours of community service, and that was just it. And, that was kind of how the community requirement was in that regard. But when we start integrating these different aspects, it's gonna, I think, create a little conflicts with the families and some of the communities as well. Now, if the school wants to promote certain aspects and after school things, I think that's great. But I think the goal here is graduation requirements, specifically what you guys are trying to address right now. Am I correct?
Yes, the board has been charged with reviewing the graduation requirements and then creating recommendations to align them with the profile of a graduate.
And my whole point of bringing up that thing before the Forbes study on the state of Washington education standards was more as should the focus be on strengthening some of the current curriculum or kind of making this kind of more expansive criteria? That was kind of just, and that's why when I come back to this, I'm kind of trying to bring it back to maybe square one. Maybe those requirements need more focus at first. That was my only feedback in bringing up that study.
Thanks, William. Appreciate those comments. Okay, well, I'm noting that we are at time. I feel like I could talk to all of you all day, but I want to be respectful of folks' time. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. And again, you're welcome to reach out to us over email or engage in other ways in future listening sessions and board meetings. We want to keep hearing from all of you about your feedback on this. So especially if you didn't get to share your thoughts today, please do reach out to us over email. And then I will just say, Shira, I know your hand is up. So if folks need to hop off, feel free. But Shira, I want to honor the fact that your hand's been up for a few minutes as well.
Hi, thank you so much. I just wanted to say a couple questions. Well, I'll try to be brief. So to Lynn Crowley's point about the importance of students learning from the diversity of others, I really want to echo, I agree with that. I think the ethnic and racial and religious and political diversity of our schools in Washington is such a strength and such an amazing opportunity for students in public school. I am concerned that the ethnic studies curriculum and the way it's kind of been co-opted in recent years is no longer teaching those multiple ethnicities. It's no longer celebrating that multiculturalism, and instead it's kind of become this very radical political thing that I saw some others comment on. So I wanted to echo those comments as well, and those concerns. And I'm also concerned that will we lose some of that as students are encouraged to kind of individualize, to leave high school early, to pursue their own interests in field work? You know, I just want to make sure that we aren't going to lose that exposure to the diversity of Washington that the public schools offers. So that's the first question. The second was to ask a follow-up question to Ms. Huguenot's point about the community learning. How is the state board going to maintain the accountability with so many community partners? I mean, we have so many mechanisms in place to keep the schools and the teachers and the classrooms accountable, like to the special ed laws, to the civil rights laws. You know, you can file a Public Records Act request, you can bring a lawsuit if your student's not having their special needs met, and all those kinds of things. And when the legislature acts, they direct their power to the governmental agencies like the schools. When we use community partners, how are we going to maintain that same credibility and accountability is just a question I have about that. And then the last question is, has there been any thought given to, you know, there's also a lot of research that standards can help reduce inequities. Like I've seen that the SAT is one of the best, it's like the single best way to identify underprivileged students with great, you know, academic potential for college, and to find them when they've been left behind because they've been not noticed by the teachers or something like that. Is there concern that as students develop their own curriculum more and more, that those who are the most driven and come from the most affluent families are going to do the most and get themselves on some trajectory, and then students who are coming from underprivileged backgrounds are going to fall further behind? Has there been thought given to whether the individualization of the pathways will increase the inequities? So sorry, that's a lot of questions and we may not have time, but I just wanted to ask those, and I'm happy to follow up by email. I'm just curious how the state board is navigating that.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think we have time to respond to all of those questions, but I would encourage you to follow up by email. I was trying to think if there's one that I could even try to answer quickly. I would say, like, for instance, as far as the community partners, when school districts provide credit through mastery-based crediting, which is something that Sulan was talking about, school districts are still responsible. They're still sort of held to the same standards, if you know what I mean. Like, they're still the ones recognizing the student learning as far as it aligns to state learning standards. It's just that the community partners are the ones that are overseeing those outside of school experiences. So all of that to say, there are laws and regulations around those things. And I think as far as your concerns, again, just because it's still overseen by the school district, then those are taken care of. And I saw Randy unmute, so Randy, jump in.
Yeah, I just would add too that I think mastery-based learning, as an example, in the way at least that we're talking about it and envisioning it, relies on standards. So those standards are still a critical part of it. And what varies is when and how students demonstrate they've met the standards, but not the standards themselves.
Right. And I would add that assessment is an important part of standards-based learning. Now, the assessment may not be a traditional assessment. It could be a demonstration. It could be a portfolio. It could be an oral test. It doesn't have to be a standard-based assessment or a standardized assessment. And we do also still have standardized assessments. We have Washington State assessment system. We no longer rely on that as an exit exam.
All right. So with that, I know we're over time. Thank you all very much for being here today. We really appreciate it. And again, please reach out if you want to continue any of the conversations we've had today. Thank you very much. Take care all.